This episode is brought to you by Rescue Intelitech, innovating solutions to keep firefighters safe. Their Solo Rescue Decon Washer helps reduce cancer risks by cleaning contaminated gear quickly and effectively. Learn more at rescueintelitech.com because clean gear saves lives.
Need reliable firefighting gear? From helmets to boots, find it all at thefirestore.com, trusted by first responders everywhere. Shop seasonal savings on the gear that keeps you ready.
Hi, Chris McClune here with Fire Apparatus and Emergency Equipment. Welcome to this edition of our podcast. It's Thanksgiving week. This is going to deploy on the Monday of Thanksgiving week. And of course, I hope that everyone in our audience has a wonderful Thanksgiving. As I said in my editorial for our November print issue, I'm basically going to be watching planes, trains, and automobiles, bunch of football, dinner, and then I'm transitioning over to National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. It's a great time of year. Gets our holiday season kicked off. And of course, it's great having family. If you're on shift, if you are working, I hope that you have a quiet shift. But if not, I hope that you stay safe and that everybody gets back to the station okay. Wanted to talk this month about apparatus reliability, and I was going to get a little bit into whether or not we need to rethink the criteria that we have in NFPA 1900 governing fire apparatus and when to take it out of frontline service, when to replace it completely. And I guess to start off, I wanted to talk about, the car that I start off with. The first car I ever drove was a 1978 Dodge Aspen, slant six. It's going to run forever, from what I'm told. Might still be running somewhere. No pickup. That I can confirm. There was no pickup with this vehicle, but apparently those slant sixes, man, they ran forever. Carbureted vehicle, no fuel injection on this. So, when you got in, I explained to my kids, what you had to do to start a car back then. You had to give it some gas. You had to hope you weren't flooding it. If you did flood it, you had to get out with the ether, spray it into the carburetor, get back in, hope that it starts. 9 times out of 10 it did if you had to go that route. Reliable vehicle, the frame gave out on it. But it probably had about 89 or 90,000 miles, which we were pushing it. And, this was the first car that I ever drove regularly. I had it because I was a commuter to college. So my dad got himself a newer car. This was the one. It wasn't my car, but I was allowed to use it, frequently. And I was lucky enough that my sister behind me, she didn't end up getting her license until she was in college. So for all intents and purposes, it was my car, but technically it was not. So when my father would buy a car, he has never owned a new car. He usually, and it took him a long time before he bought a used car from a dealer. 90% of the time, 99% of the time, he was purchasing vehicles from private owners. And when he would do that based on what he paid for it, he would figure, okay, I'm going to get X amount of miles out of this car. There might have been a couple of cars over his lifetime where he got over 100, but it was back then, 1970 or when I was driving that 78 Aspen, it was 1991. And back then there were cars that were getting to 100,000 miles, but maybe not as routinely now. I'm looking for a truck right now. My pickup truck, 2000 GMC Sierra. It's got 198,000 miles on it. I'm looking for trucks, and some of the used ones that I see at dealers have got 186,000, 150,000. These are routinely, we haven't perfected everything because they're not lasting forever. Mechanical components do wear out, but we have gotten to a point where the reliability of these vehicles is incredible. My wife and I own a 2003 Camry. It's with my son at college right now. It's got 150,000 plus on it. We're expecting it to keep trucking along just fine as long as we take care of it. It's funny. I was giving somebody a ride home one time from work. And he was much older than me. He was probably in his late 50s, early 60s. I was still in my 20s. And the car, this was in the Aspen, I was giving him the ride home, and he goes, he was asking me about it and stuff. And he goes, I figure if you just change the oil, these things will last forever. And there is a lot to be said for that. Naturally, you do need to do more, but just routine oil changes go a long way toward keeping these things on the road. So I'm sitting there and I'm thinking about that, and then I started to sort of then I was thinking back to the fire truck training conference. I went to that back at the end of September. And, it's great to have all these vehicle technicians in one place because you get a chance to talk to them. And there were a lot of morning breakfast conversations that I had. And there was one day where we were talking about the different fleets. That everybody at the table had a different fleet. And this one person said they had a very diverse fleet, not all one set apparatus manufacturer, and also all different ages. And he said, the trucks are old, but they run, and this was a guy, he worked for a municipality. So this was a municipality's fleet that he was servicing. And, it was up in the Northwest part of the country. And, he was also talking about how, his calling area was pretty immense, the distance that he had to travel and everything. So we're looking at this. And so, he was saying, he had some 30-year-old vehicles that he was still servicing. And you say, wow, okay, so these things are 30 years old. They're well maintained. They're still chugging along. And it really makes me wonder, especially in this current atmosphere that we find ourselves in, and please understand, I'm not taking a shot at anybody. This is not a dig on anybody. It's not a dig on the NFPA. I am sure that there are very specific reasons why they chose the numbers that they did. But for this period, for this moment in time, should maybe the NFPA look to switch from saying that, right now, NFPA 1900 says that at 15 years old, you should take a frontline rig and move it into reserve status. And then at 25 years old, you should offload that surplus rig. At 25 years old. Now, there are any number of fire departments out there that do not have the money, I guess, really is what it is, to replace trucks at that frequency. And this is, believe me when I tell you, this is a multifaceted thing. Because when you talk about, I think that a well-maintained truck can easily make it to 30 years old. But there are departments that they cannot do it. They can't do it. They couldn't do it 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And I hate to think that there are departments out there that consider themselves not compliant with NFPA because of that. Now, that's a funding thing. And I think, nationwide, we need to figure out if there's some way to get these folks the funding that they need. It doesn't necessarily have to be a rural department that doesn't replace its rigs. It could be a suburban department that just doesn't go to a lot of calls during the year and, keeps their trucks in mint condition. My fire company is going on, I think just the other day, we were at 561 calls for the year. Not a ton, pretty decent year for us. Likely we will make it to 600, which is we've been in that 500 to 600 range. We've never hit 700. There is another fire company in our township that does, 800 plus. To me, that I don't know how they do it. Sometimes at our place, it's, you're talking about a call a day, at even 561 calls. So it's a lot. That's how often we run. There are other fire companies that may only run 200 times a year, and it may only be a one truck run. So, just that frequency really doesn't require them to take a truck out of frontline service at 15 years old, just because, the NFPA says that you should do it. Hey, I'm probably going to have people come at me saying, they say it because of this, and then you can do this and you still be compliant. I'm just saying that for the 15 doesn't fit every fire department. There are very busy departments that are replacing frontline rigs every 10 years because they beat the crap out of them. Then you get into, all the different things that these trucks are being used for now. Now, maybe, they're not being replaced when they should be, because of any number of reasons. Now, I do want to get into the cost of the rigs today. And again, this is not a dig at anybody. It is what it is. Our fire apparatus today, even if you go with a stock rig, you might get it at a reduced rate than a custom rig, a reduced price. You might get it quicker than a custom rig right now. And I'm not even going to get into the lead times because, again, that is what it is. But given the cost of the fire trucks, it really does exceed the ability of some fire departments to replace their trucks. They have no choice but to hold on to the ones that they have. Now, there are some out there that are running 40, 45-year-old rigs, and they're holding them together as best that they can. There are other ones who might have a 25-year-old rig, and it's fine. I can think of one department in my town, one fire company in my township that's got a 1995. Is it reserve? Yes, it is reserve, but it is. I mean, and it's in pristine condition. It's a pumper. We may need to think about, it does the same thing apply for a pumper as for a ladder, as for a rescue, and things of that nature. But I'm really beginning to wonder, and I'm going to talk. This is leading up to another podcast. I'm going to have Ricky Riley on. We're going to be talking trucks, and I just want to get his feel on it. I mean, in some ways, it is one of those classic, well, it depends, Chris. If you work in this department, you're going to replace them more frequently anyway, so it doesn't even matter. But, if you work in these other departments, does the 15-year mark make sense? Especially, there are fire departments in this country that just don't run to a lot of calls. They just don't have a lot of calls. There are fire companies within large municipalities, large municipal departments that are the slow ones. I can think of a few that I've encountered over the years, the people in those stations who I've encountered. So, it happens everywhere. And I just look at that 15 years and I go, can it be 20? Could we run that up to 20? Take it out of frontline service at 20 years? Is that 5 years even? Does that even mean anything? But the reliability of these trucks today, the safety concerns are not what they were 30 years ago, 40 years ago, which is really what NFPA 1900 is all about. It's trying to ensure that we're operating reliable, or I shouldn't say reliable, but safe fire apparatus. But the reliability of these things, I mean, even at 560 calls a year, take mine, we're not putting a tremendous number of miles on these trucks. Engine hours, perhaps, the pump hours are even less. So, obviously, if you're in a really busy area, yeah, I mean, you're gonna tax these trucks. You're gonna run them hard. But if you're maintaining them, there shouldn't be. You should be able to get that 20 years out of them. I know that for me, some of this is just my personality coming out. I'm going to replace that 25-year-old vehicle, and I'm going to replace it with something that I probably will get 15 to 20 years out of. That is how my mind works. That's how I think. In 15 years, I might be ready. Maybe I'll take it up into the 20-year range. And then really at that point I'll have to downsize pretty good. But I might not even be allowed to drive. And at that point you never know. But that's how my mind works. But I look at the trucks that Weldon Fire Company has sold over the years. These are trucks that still have a long serviceable lifetime ahead of them. Now, why do we do it at that? Well, we have our replacement cycle. We also look at things. We look at the market and we say, okay, is this the time to sell this one to get the maximum value that we can for it? And that's simply a departmental or a fire company decision at that point. But for those without those types of resources to be able to do that, doesn't make sense to say 20 years for frontline, they're going to be safe if they're well maintained. So 20 years for frontline, 30 years to retire completely. Even then, we're going to have fire departments that simply cannot do it. But hey, right now, if we were to change that in the next revision cycle, that would give fire companies, fire departments, maybe an extra 5 years to figure out the funding. Now, the funding aspect of this is a whole other thing. And so I realize that I am operating from a better position than some other fire departments may. I'm very lucky to be in the township that I am and to have the township programs that we have in terms of preventive maintenance, reimbursement, in terms of the funding that we get from the township that we can put toward certain things. Very lucky to have that. You could probably go 50 miles away from me, and there are fire companies that don't have that. Where my wife is from. She is from northeastern Pennsylvania. It's certainly more rural. It is certainly a place that doesn't see as much work. I'll tell you what, the fire company near her does see a lot of highway incidents. There's an interstate that goes kind of right, not through it, but next to it. Next to her old town. So, they probably do a lot more vehicle rescues than I do, probably a lot more vehicle fires than I do, but maybe fewer structure fires than I would go to. But she's about 160 miles out. That's an area where, there are a lot of chicken barbecues going on, a lot of pancake breakfasts, but, you can only take that so far when you think about what a pumper costs today, no matter what type you go with. If you decide not to go custom, yes, it will be less expensive, but it's still certainly a pretty decent price tag on that, depending on what you do. But still, the funding aspect of this, the resources aspect of this that fire companies have to put toward a new rig, it's just nice. So and I am going to say that, a lot of this does fall on the fire company. When we talk about some of the things that are going on right now and some of the trouble that fire companies, fire departments are having getting new rigs because of the lead times, because of the costs, how well did they maintain that fleet? Did they wait way too long to get a truck? And now it's just coincidental that they have chosen now, to get it, along with all the other people who have decided that now is the time. What was the condition of that truck? Why did you wait until it was falling off its wheels before you decided to look into it? I'm not saying that's the case for everybody, but I'm just trying to illustrate that the onus of this does fall on the fire departments as well. It is not all on the manufacturing side. The onus does fall on fire departments to make wise decisions, to look ahead. I have said many times, and I realize again that it's not necessarily typical of the entire fire service, but my fire company has a rescue truck that we took delivery of in 2016, and that rescue truck we are going to be putting together a committee in the beginning of the year. Presumably, hopefully, we're going to get that together to replace that vehicle. But we're looking at it as a 5-year process because of everything. You have to look at these things and plan accordingly. We're starting to look at the budget process for that next truck. We're starting to look at the truck we have. What can we get for it if we sell it privately? What can we get for it if we sell some of the equipment along with it? But I'll tell you, we sold, I believe it was either 2020 or 2021 that we sold one of our twin 97 Spartan Salisbury pumpers. I forget if it left. I think it probably left in 2021, but it might have been 2020 that it left the house. That was 1997, leaving in 2020. That's a 23-year-old truck. It was still in fine working order. To the best of my knowledge, it's still out there running. Every once in a while, somebody sends a picture of it to us. And it really is amazing just how you know it's your truck. But that's a story for another time. But that funding aspect has to be also taken in by the fire company itself. I know that there are a million fire companies out there that are taking those steps, but for those that aren't, you do have to take a little bit of the onus is on you a bit to figure out, okay, we're going to need to buy a truck here. We need to start putting together the money for it and the funding for it here. How are we going to do it? And then plan accordingly. However, it might not be that bad a deal if you had 5 extra years to figure out how you're going to do that. And really put things together. I know that there are going to be fire companies out there that even at 30 years, they just either can't afford or don't have the need to replace the vehicle. But it would be, I'm just thinking maybe it's time, just because of the environment we find ourselves in right now, and because of the fact that the trucks we're running are way more reliable than they were 30 and 40 years ago. They can last longer. It's not that much different than our vehicles, our personal vehicles. They're lasting. I got a pickup truck. It's got almost 200,000 miles on it. Like I said, we've got that 2003 Camry. That's a 22-year-old vehicle, still chugging right along. How long will it go? I'm not sure, but I know that it's got a bunch more miles in it. And if it doesn't, then we'll address that. But for right now, it's in good shape. So that's really what I just wanted to talk about this month. I don't know. I'm going to talk to Ricky about it in an upcoming episode of Talking Trucks. We're going to talk a little bit about that and just see where he's coming from. I know in his department, whatever it is on the standard is not going to matter as much, because his department has a replacement cycle that they go through. That it's set. It's it's a little out of whack right now because of the lead times that we've been experiencing. But it is a set period of time. They take the truck out of frontline service here. They take it out of reserve service here, and they move it around. Planning, keep that record keeping up. Make sure you know exactly what's going on with your fleet. Make sure you can and if you need to start stocking parts just to keep things going. I realize that 30 years from now, the parts might not be available, and that's something that does play into it as well. But if you're planning along the way, maybe you keep a certain stock of particular parts, especially the ones go every so often. That's really what I wanted to talk about. I'm not taking a dig at the NFPA. I'm not taking a dig at any of the manufacturers for what's going on right now. I'm just saying, hey, maybe it is time to think about changing that. Maybe they can't. Maybe based on the reasoning behind it, they can't do it. But it might be time. It might be time to think about it. So anyway, it's Thanksgiving week, like I said. I do hope that everyone out there has a great, safe Thanksgiving. It's also a big travel time. Luckily, seems like the airlines may have gotten kind of squared away. You never know. But we do have some busy travel days coming up. So to everyone, have a very happy Thanksgiving. If you are working, like I said before, be safe. Hopefully you have a very quiet evening. You can sit down and have some camaraderie at the Thanksgiving table with your turkey and stuffing, or whatever you choose to have with your meal. So again, this has been Chris McClune with Fire Apparatus and Emergency Equipment. Have a good one, everyone. Have a great holiday and stay safe.